So I want you to picture this. It's the summer of 1994.
Okay.
You are 10 years old, and you are currently occupying what is basically the ultimate impenetrable safe space, right? A suburban backyard.
Oh, yeah. Nothing feels safer.
Exactly. I mean, think back to what that actually feels like. You've got the smell of freshly cut grass, and it's mingling with that really sharp chemical tang of, like, off-bug spray.
Right, the very specific summer smell.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're inside this bright orange nylon pup tent. The July heat is just, it's stifling. It's heavy. It's completely trapped inside that tiny dome with you. But, you don't care at all.
No, because you're a kid.
Right. You're asleep right next to your best friend. And it's that kind of deep, untroubled, just heavy sleep that you really only get when you're that young. Back when the world feels entirely predictable. Like when the biggest threat to your actual existence is a scraped knee.
It's a highly specific kind of peace, isn't it? I mean, the whole architecture of a childhood sleepover is built on this absolute trust in your environment.
Right, totally. Until you wake up, morning sunlight is bleeding into the tent. And you see it. There is this massive 38-inch vertical slice in the fabric of the tent.
Oh, just the thought of it.
I know, right? A violent, jagged slash that absolutely wasn't there when you closed your eyes.
Yeah.
And your best friend, he is just gone forever.
It is really the ultimate nightmare scenario. I mean, it takes the absolute innocence of childhood and it just punctures it literally and figuratively.
That is the exact nightmare we are dissecting today. We're taking a deep dive into Riley Sager's psychological thriller, Middle of the Night. And what's so terrifying about this source material isn't just the missing boy.
No, it's bigger than that.
Exactly. It's the realization that the flimsy nylon of that tent is basically the only thing separating suburban safety from absolute chaotic evil. So our mission with this deep dive today is to really extract the most important insights from this text.
And there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh, definitely. We're unpacking the mechanics of memory, the crushing weight of survivor's guilt, and frankly, the suffocating paranoia of the American suburb.
Yeah, and what we need to establish right away for everyone listening is that this isn't just, your standard whodunit.
Right.
It is, at its core, this really clinical, terrifying examination of how a single traumatic night can just freeze a human being in time for 30 years.
Wow, yeah, frozen in time.
Exactly. It looks at the extreme lengths the human mind will go to, like literally building supernatural defenses, conjuring ghosts and phantoms, just to avoid confronting painfully human, painfully mundane truths.
So let's step right onto the pristine, terrifyingly quiet pavement of Hemlock Circle to see how this actually works.
Let's do it.
We need to look at the anatomy of what is essentially a locked tent mystery, right? And establish the foundational lore here. It is July 15th, 1994. 10-year-olds Ethan Marsh and Billy Behringer are camping in Ethan's yard. Ethan sleeps through the entire night.
Which is key.
Very key. But he wakes up to find Billy missing. And the detail that just wrecks me, the thing that gets so far under my skin from the text, is the sound.
The zipper.
Yes. Ethan is haunted for the next 30 years by an auditory memory he isn't even sure he actually heard. This scritch. The sound of the tent zipper or maybe a knife tearing through the nylon, it just becomes the relentless soundtrack to his lifelong nightmares.
Yeah, and we also have to look at Billy's last words to Ethan before they went to sleep. This is a detail Ethan kept secret for decades. Billy looks at him and says, "Hakuna Matata, dude."
Oh, man, it's so perfectly 1994.
It really is.
It's such a pure, innocent Disney kid thing to say, which makes the fact that a knife slices through their tent just hours later so much more violent. The contrast is staggering.
That's heartbreaking, really.
It is. And 30 years later, Billy is basically an urban legend. He's known on all these true crime message boards as the Lost Boy. And as our story opens, his remains have just been discovered at the nearby Hawthorne Institute, which is this place shrouded in its own deeply creepy local mythology.
Right, and the location of the remains is a crucial catalyst here.
How so?
Well, for 30 years, Billy was a question mark. A missing person leaves this sliver of hope, right? However irrational it might be.
Right, like maybe he ran away and he's still out there.
Exactly. But the discovery of the remains totally extinguishes that hope. It forces the timeline to collapse. The past is suddenly violently dragged right into Ethan's present.
Usually when we look at mysteries, we talk about the classic locked room scenario.
Sure,
like
yeah.
an impossible crime in a completely sealed environment. But here's the horrific irony of Sager's setup. The room here isn't a vault. It isn't like a study with a heavy oak door and a deadbolt.
No, not at all.
It is literally just a millimeter of bright orange nylon. That tiny translucent membrane is the only thing separating the perceived safety of a manicured New Jersey lawn from the terrifying, violent unknown. It's the illusion of safety rendered as a physical object.
That illusion is exactly why the psychological weight of this specific crime is so staggering and why it resonates so deeply with the public in the source material.
Because it could happen to anyone.
Precisely. Why does the internet become obsessed with Billy Behringer? Because we culturally agree that the home, the cul-de-sac, the hedge-lined property that is the sanctuary,
Right.
to have someone reach into that sanctuary, slice open a child's tent, and extract a human being without leaving a single trace, it completely shatters the illusion of the American suburb. It tells every parent reading the news, you're not safe and your children are not safe, no matter how nicely manicured your lawn is.
God, that's so chilling. The perimeter is totally compromised. And while the rest of the world moved on, turning Billy into a true crime internet fixation and treating Ethan as just that other boy in the background of the famous newspaper photograph.
Right, he's just a footnote to them.
Exactly. But Ethan himself never really left that tent emotionally. That absolute lack of closure didn't just ruin his childhood, it literally broke his brain's ability to rest. If you don't know who sliced the tent, your brain decides it's never safe to close your eyes again.
It's a textbook hypervigilance response. The brain's threat detection system just gets stuck in the on position.
And that biological refusal to sleep is exactly why, 30 years later, so now we're in July 2024, Ethan is awake at 2 in the morning to see something impossible out his window.
Because he's back at the house.
Yes. Ethan is now 40 years old. He's an English teacher, a chronic insomniac, and he has just moved back into his childhood home on Hemlock Circle because his parents retired to Florida. And almost immediately upon returning to the physical space where the trauma occurred, the impossible phenomena begin.
Which makes sense psychologically. The environment acts as a massive psychological trigger. He's basically placing himself back inside the crucible.
Right. Because he's always awake, Ethan watches the motion sensor garage lights on his cul-de-sac flick on and off, but they don't just trigger randomly from, like, a raccoon or something.
No, there's a pattern.
They trigger sequentially, moving from house to house to house, as if an invisible entity is deliberately walking the perimeter of Hemlock Circle.
Just pacing the neighborhood.
Yeah. And then baseballs mysteriously start appearing in his yard.
But not just any baseballs. When they were kids, throwing a baseball over the hedge was the exact secret code Billy used to ask Ethan to come out and play.
See, that is a highly specific, deeply personal trigger. It's communication designed exclusively for Ethan's psyche.
But wait, I completely disagree with Ethan's reaction here, and I want to push back on how we interpret this.
Okay, let's hear.
Reading through the notes, Ethan genuinely starts to believe Billy's spirit is roaming the neighborhood. He even buys a trail cam to catch the ghost. If this is a murder mystery, why is he defaulting to the supernatural? You don't buy a trail cam and stalk your own yard if you feel safe or comforted by a ghost. He's clinically paranoid. His cortisol's maxed out from decades of insomnia. Isn't he just having a massive, long overdue psychotic break?
That's a completely logical assumption from the outside looking in. But we have to look closer at the neurobiology of extreme trauma.
Ethan isn't having a psychotic break in the clinical sense of, losing total contact with shared reality. He is exhibiting a profound, desperate trauma response. Look at his baseline.
He hasn't slept in 30 years.
Exactly. Chronic insomnia deprives the brain of REM sleep, which is the exact phase where the brain processes and files away emotional residue. Because he can't sleep, he can't process his crushing survivor's guilt.
Right. The why Billy and not me feeling.
Yes. He literally sleeps in the house right next to the empty space where his friend was taken.
Yeah.
The ghost theory isn't a symptom of psychosis. It's a psychological safety blanket.
I mean, I'm really struggling with that framing. Believing a supernatural entity is stalking your house in the middle of the night is a safety blanket? How on earth is that comforting?
Well, think about the alternative. If it is not a ghost leaving baseballs, then what is it?
A person.
It is a living, breathing human being. If a human being orchestrated Billy's disappearance, and if a human being is now taunting Ethan 30 years later, that means profound malice exists right next door.
Oh. Oh, wow.
It means humanity is deeply flawed, calculating, and cruel. For Ethan's exhausted brain, it is actually vastly easier, emotionally, to believe his best friend is a restless spirit throwing baseballs, trying to communicate from the beyond, than to accept the terrifying reality of human evil.
So it's like choosing the lesser of two evils for his brain.
Exactly. Ghosts follow rules. Ghosts have unfinished business. Humans are chaotic. A ghost means Billy is still around. A human intruder means Ethan is in imminent physical danger.
That distinction is fascinating. It's literally the choice between a tragic haunting and an active predator. And this internal battle ties directly into the concept of the dream that the text focuses on so heavily.
Right, the recurring nightmare.
Yeah. Every single night, Ethan has this recurring visceral experience. He falls asleep, wakes up slightly, realizes he's back in the 1994 tent, senses a heavy presence outside, and then hears the screech of the knife cutting the nylon.
The sound again.
Always the sound, and he always wakes up in a cold sweat before he sees a face. Ethan claims he has absolutely no memory of waking up when Billy was actually taken. So what is the dream? Is it just his survivor's guilt manifesting as a nightmare, or is it a repressed memory clawing its way up?
The source material plays brilliantly with this ambiguity, leaning heavily into the concept of state-dependent memory.
What exactly is that?
It's a real psychological phenomenon where an individual can only access certain memories when they are in the exact same physiological or emotional state they were in when the event was encoded.
Okay, so because he's back in the house.
Partially, yes. Ethan's brain has built a massive fortress around the events of that night. The dream isn't just a nightmare. It is his subconscious basically slipping encrypted notes under that fortress door.
That's a great way to put it.
The brain is saying, I have vital survival information, but the raw data is too dangerous to give to your conscious mind while you are awake and undefended. So it packages the memory as a recurring nightmare, releasing the pressure valve just a tiny bit each night.
Wow, so the subconscious is essentially trying to protect the host while simultaneously warning him.
Exactly.
But if it's not a ghost triggering those motion sensor lights in 2024, it has to be a physical person. And if it's a person walking the cul-de-sac at 2 a.m. without setting off dogs or alarms, the monster isn't some random drifter in the woods.
No, it can't be.
The logic dictates it is someone with a key to the neighborhood.
Which forces Ethan and the reader to turn their gaze away from the dark woods and back toward the brightly lit homes of Hemlock Circle.
Think about your own neighborhood for a second.
Yeah.
The people you wave to when you're taking out the recycling. The neighbors whose packages you hold when they go out of town.
You think you know them.
Right. Sager's text makes you realize that you only know the daytime curated version of these people.
Oh.
You have absolutely no idea what they are doing at 3 a.m. when the streetlights are off. Hemlock Circle isn't just a neighborhood. It basically functions like a submarine.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, everyone is breathing the same recycled air, completely isolated from the outside world by the geography of the cul-de-sac. And when you're in a submarine, if one person's compartment springs a leak, if one person harbors a deadly secret, the pressure threatens to crush everyone aboard. The paranoia is shared because the environment is sealed. Let's look at the crew of this submarine.
The cast of characters living next door provides a masterclass in claustrophobic paranoia. Every single resident is carrying something heavy.
First, we have Rajesh Patel. Back in 1994, he was the classic neighborhood teenage bully. Now, in a twist of profound irony, he's the weary local detective handling the newly discovered remains of Billy Barringer.
But he's not an objective investigator.
No, Rajesh is compromised. He harbors deep secrets about a complicated, hidden relationship he had with another neighborhood boy, Johnny Chen, who died of a tragic drug overdose years ago.
Rajesh is a really fascinating psychological study. He's a classic example of someone masking immense personal guilt with the shield of institutional authority.
How does that play out with Ethan?
Well, he bullies Ethan in the present day, using his badge to tell Ethan to basically back off the investigation. But it's not because he's a corrupt cop protecting a murderer.
Then why?
It's because Rajesh is terrified of his own past coming to light. He feels directly responsible for Johnny Chen's downward spiral and death. If the rocks on Hemlock Circle start getting overturned, Rajesh knows his own sins will crawl out. His aggression toward Ethan is purely defensive.
Wow. Okay, then you have Russ Chen, Johnny's younger brother. Russ still lives right next door. He harbors this deep-seated, corrosive anger. Growing up, he had this profound jealousy of the tight-knit friendship Ethan and Billy shared.
Because he was left out.
Exactly. Russ felt entirely abandoned and overshadowed. He was the odd kid out. And how does he cope with this decades-long simmering rage? The text specifically notes he compulsively does push-ups all the time. He's literally trying to physically armor himself against his emotional pain.
It's a striking, tragic, physical manifestation of emotional inadequacy. Russ is basically trapped in a state of arrested development.
Yeah, he's still that jealous 10-year-old.
Right. He is trying to build a muscular body strong enough to protect an incredibly fragile, broken 10-year-old ego. He wants to project threat, but he's actually radiating vulnerability.
That's so sad. We also have Ashley Wallace. She was the cool, aspirational teenage babysitter back in 1994. Like the younger kids all looked up to.
Everybody had that babysitter.
Totally. But now she's a struggling single mother who has been forced to move back home to care for her ailing father, bringing her young son Henry with her. She is physically weighed down by dashed dreams and a life that just didn't pan out.
So everyone is trapped there, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have to talk about the adults from back then, because the rot wasn't just in the kids. There's Fritz van de Veer, who ran the Hawthorne Institute, this deeply unsettling parapsychology-focused research center located right near their homes.
The Hawthorne Institute serves as the geographic and thematic anchor for the town's buried strangeness. It wasn't just a quirky local landmark. It was an institution actively exploring the boundaries of the unknown, operating right on the edge of this deeply conventional suburb.
And the most shocking revelation for Ethan isn't just that the Institute existed, it's the discovery that his own mother, the woman who made him sandwiches and tucked him in, secretly participated in terrifying, bizarre rituals at that institute. She was part of the weirdness.
That revelation is a structural earthquake in the narrative.
I mean, his own mom.
Right. It strips away the absolute final layer of Ethan's childhood innocence. When you are a child, your parents are the ultimate arbiters of safety and normalcy. Finding out his mother was a willing participant in the dark underbelly of the town means the adults weren't protectors, they were complicit. The rot was inside his own house.
There's a brilliant, chilling quote from Detective Palmer, the state police investigator brought in to handle the remains. She looks at this idyllic neighborhood, looks at Ethan, and tells him point blank, "Monsters aren't hiding in the woods. They live next door."
It forces a complete paradigm shift. The text is demanding we consider our proximity to evil. By establishing that Billy was likely taken or killed by someone in the immediate neighborhood, the source material turns the sanctuary into a hunting ground. The predator isn't a wolf howling in the distant forest. The predator is the person who brings in your trash cans when you're on vacation.
This realization that his mother is compromised, that the local detective is compromised, that the neighbors are all hiding something, leads Ethan to a terrifying, really desperate conclusion. He realizes he can trust absolutely no one's version of the past.
He's totally alone in this.
Yeah. If the adults are part of the rot, the only objective truth left is locked inside his own brain. He is the only actual eyewitness to the crime. He was right there. He just needs to bypass his own psychological security system to remember what he saw.
Which brings us to the most visceral, intense sequence in the entire source material. Ethan decides to take a sledgehammer to his own trauma defenses.
It is wild. He enacts this incredibly unorthodox, terrifying plan to unlock his repressed memories. On the exact 30th anniversary of Billy's disappearance, in the dead of July, Ethan sets up the old, faded orange tent in his backyard.
He recreates the scene.
He does. He crawls inside, he lies down in the sweltering claustrophobic heat, and he has Detective Palmer stand outside in the dark and physically slice the tent open with a knife. He is deliberately recreating the exact sensory conditions of the crime.
It is a brilliant narrative climax, but from a psychological standpoint, it is incredibly reckless and, well, profound.
I have to ask about the mechanics of this because to me it sounds like absolute torture. Can you imagine the sheer terror of doing that?
Right.
Voluntarily putting yourself back in the exact physical and emotional space where your life was completely ruined.
It's unthinkable for most people.
And waiting for someone to take a blade to the thin fabric separating you from the dark. Does state-dependent memory actually work like this? Can you just brute force a traumatic memory to the surface by recreating the temperature and the sound?
In theory, yes. Though obviously, clinical psychologists would strongly advise against doing it without massive therapeutic support. Let's break down the neurobiology of what Ethan is actually doing here.
Please do.
Think of the hippocampus as the brain's librarian. Its job is to process short-term experiences and file them away into long-term memory.
Okay, the librarian. Got it.
But during a highly traumatic event, the brain is absolutely flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. The librarian basically panics, drops the files, and shoves the memory into a locked drawer in the amygdala, which is the brain's primitive fear center.
So the memory isn't deleted, it's just quarantined.
Precisely. The brain says, if we process the fact that our neighbor just reached in and stole our best friend, we will literally break. We will not be able to function. So we are going to bury it for survival.
Wow.
The problem is you cannot open that locked drawer just by asking nicely or thinking really hard. The conscious mind doesn't have the key. The only way to open that drawer is to recreate the exact chemical and sensory state the body was in when the lock was turned.
Like when a smell suddenly takes you back to middle school.
Exactly, but on a massive, terrifying scale. Smell, sound, and temperature are our most primitive, strongest tethers to the past. The olfactory bulb and the auditory cortex are hardwired directly to the amygdala.
So by lying in the stifling heat, smelling the old nylon, and crucially, hearing that specific scritched sound of the blade tearing the fabric.
He is hacking his own nervous system. He is tricking his amygdala into thinking it is July 15, 1994, forcing the locked drawer to finally pop open.
And it works. It works terrifyingly well. The sensory overload shatters the dam, the memory unlocks, and once that happens, the dominoes of the truth finally begin to fall. This leads to the cascading confessions in the final act of the text.
And we really need to break this down incredibly carefully because Sager doesn't just give us one neat twist.
Not at all. He gives us 4 distinct, overlapping layers of truth that hit Ethan and the listener in rapid succession. It is basically a symphony of tragic mistakes.
It's important to pace these out because each layer dismantles a completely different psychological defense Ethan has built over 30 years.
Let's start with twist number 1, the ghost. The entity leaving the baseballs in the yard, the unseen force triggering the motion lights sequentially around the submarine of Hemlock Circle. It wasn't Billy's restless spirit, and it wasn't a psychopathic killer returning to taunt Ethan.
No.
It was Andy Berenger. Billy's younger brother, now a grown man, broken by the system. Andy had been engaging in deliberate psychological warfare.
Andy's motivation completely recontextualizes the dread of the first half of the book.
He wasn't trying to drive Ethan crazy just for the fun of it. Andy wanted to force Ethan to remember what he heard that night, because the text reveals that Andy had snuck outside 30 years ago and overheard a vicious argument between Ethan and Billy right before they went into the tent. Andy knew Ethan was hiding something.
Andy's presence grounds the supernatural dread into a heartbreaking, grounded reality. It wasn't a ghost seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. It was just a grieving, deeply damaged younger brother seeking the truth about his family. It strips away the paranormal and replaces it with profound human grief.
Which opens the door for twist number 2, the slicer. When the memory finally unlocks in the tent, Ethan remembers the face he saw illuminated in the gap of the sliced nylon.
And it wasn't a monster.
It wasn't a faceless boogeyman, it wasn't a serial killer from the woods, it was Russ Chen.
The neighbor.
The angry neighbor kid who obsessively does push-ups. Russ confesses that he cut the tent because he was furious. The text reveals the argument Andy overheard. Earlier that day, Ethan and Billy had a falling out. Ethan lost his temper, yelled at Billy, called him a freak, and told him to go die.
Just kids fighting.
Yeah, but Russ overheard this, and fueled by his own intense, simmering jealousy of their bond, he took a kitchen knife to the tent in the middle of the night just to scare them.
But this is where the narrative brilliantly subverts expectation. Russ is the slicer. Yes, but he is not the killer. Russ swears he only cut the tent in a moment of petty adolescent vindictiveness. He cut the fabric to frighten them, and then he immediately ran away back to his house.
Which perfectly explains the physical evidence, like why the tent was cut, but leaves the central horrifying mystery unsolved. Russ provided the opening, but he didn't reach in and take the boy.
And this realization leads to the most devastating psychological blow in the entire narrative.
Twist number 3, the departure. If no one reached in and grabbed Billy, how did he disappear?
He walked out.
The brutal truth is that Billy wasn't dragged out of the tent against his will. Billy was a kid deeply obsessed with ghosts, the Hawthorne Institute, and the supernatural. He thought the sudden, inexplicable slice in the tent was an invitation.
He thought it was a portal to the spirit realm.
Right. But more importantly, because his feelings were so deeply, profoundly hurt by Ethan's harsh words. His best friend calling him a freak and telling him to die. Billy felt entirely alienated. He voluntarily unzipped his sleeping bag, walked through the slice in the tent, and wandered alone into the pitch-black woods to find the ghosts.
He was looking for an escape.
He just wanted to find somewhere he belonged because he didn't feel welcome in the tent anymore.
We really need to pause and process the weight of this for Ethan. For 30 years, Ethan's survivor's guilt was based on the idea that he slept through a violent abduction. He thought he failed to protect his friend from a monster.
That he was useless.
Right. But the truth is infinitely worse. Billy wasn't stolen. Billy left because Ethan broke his heart. It validates 30 years of survivor's guilt in the most agonizing way possible. Ethan's words were the catalyst for Billy stepping out into the dark.
I can't even fathom the crushing weight of that realization. If Ethan had just apologized, if he hadn't lost his temper, Billy would have stayed in the sleeping bag.
But he didn't.
No. Billy walks into the woods, which brings us to the final, fatal piece of the puzzle. Twist number 4. The killer. Who actually killed Billy Behringer. It wasn't Fritz Van de Veer. It wasn't a cult at the Institute. It was Ashley Wallace.
The babysitter.
The cool, aspirational teenage babysitter.
The girl everyone trusted.
She breaks down and confesses. The truth is sickeningly mundane. As a rebellious 15-year-old, she had stolen her mother's car for a joyride. She was driving drunk, without a license, speeding blindly down the dark, curving road that cut through the woods near the Institute.
Oh, no.
Billy, wandering in the dark in search of spirits, stepped onto the asphalt. She hit him.
It was an accident.
It was a tragic, horrific accident. But what happened next was deliberate. Desperate to save her own future and knowing the boy was already gone, she put his body in the trunk, hid him at the Hawthorne Institute Lake, and went home. And she kept that secret, smiling at the neighborhood kids, for 30 years.
It's a breathtaking sequence of reveals because it completely reframes the entire genre of the story.
Reading these sources, my reaction was just absolute shock at the sheer banality of the evil. We spend the whole narrative looking for a mastermind. We assume there's a boogeyman, a calculated predator playing 3D chess.
Right, some evil genius.
But the truth is somehow infinitely worse because it's so incredibly human, and it was so entirely preventable.
This perfectly illustrates the chaos theory that is actually mentioned early in the text by the character Fritz. Fritz notes that grand, orchestrated tragedies are rare. The universe doesn't usually work via criminal geniuses.
It's much messier than that.
Exactly. Real tragedy is usually a cascade of small, selfish, impulsive, and deeply mundane human mistakes that happen to align at the exact wrong microsecond.
Let's trace the dominoes of this chaos theory, because when you line them up, it's staggering.
Domino 1. Ethan, a 10-year-old, says cruel words to his best friend in a fleeting moment of adolescent frustration.
Just a normal fight.
Right. Domino 2. Russ, feeling marginalized, allows his petty jealousy to drive him to an impulsive act of minor vandalism with a kitchen knife.
Domino 3. Billy, nursing a wounded heart, allows his naive, childish belief in ghosts to guide him out of safety and into the dark woods.
And Domino 4. Ashley, acting out in typical teenage rebellion, makes the selfish, panicky decision to drive drunk.
None of those 4 people woke up on July 15th intending to end a life. None of them are inherently evil monsters. But their deeply human flaws collided with mathematical precision in the middle of the night to create a 30-year nightmare that destroyed multiple families.
It removes the comfort of a villain. It's much easier to process tragedy when you can point to a singular monster and say, they did this.
Because that's outside of us.
Right. It is much harder to accept that tragedy is often just a terrifying arithmetic of bad luck and everyday selfishness.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of the text. How does a person go on living with this knowledge? How does Ethan wake up the next morning knowing that his own childhood arguments set the gears of his best friend's death into motion?
It's a heavy burden.
How do you look at Ashley, who you trusted as a babysitter, knowing she let you suffer for 30 years to protect herself?
This is the emotional crux of the story. Once the horrific truth is laid bare, how do you break the cycle of trauma? Do you succumb to the bitterness, or do you find a way to metabolize the grief?
Well, the source material gives us a remarkably poignant epilogue to answer this. It's set in December 2025, over a year after the revelations. The dust has settled. Ashley is in prison, serving time for vehicular manslaughter and concealing a body.
As she should be.
Right. And in what I honestly think is one of the most profound acts of grace I've seen in a modern thriller, Ethan makes a life-altering decision. He legally adopts Ashley's young son, Henry.
It is a stunning, deeply moving narrative resolution. It completely subverts the standard revenge thriller trope.
I have to pause and just marvel at the incredible emotional fortitude this requires from Ethan. Look at the math of what he's doing. He is actively choosing to raise the child of the woman who killed his best friend.
That takes immense strength.
The child of the woman who watched him suffer from insomnia, guilt, and paranoia for 3 decades. And never said a single word to ease his pain. And the text describes this beautiful, quiet, final scene. Henry is sitting and reading in Ethan's old childhood bedroom. And Ethan walks in and gives Henry the old dog-eared book about ghosts that once belonged to Billy.
If we look at the psychological synthesis of this ending, the author is making a massive statement. This isn't just a story about solving a cold case or figuring out who held the
Yeah,
knife.
it's about so much more.
It's fundamentally about breaking generational trauma. By adopting Henry, Ethan is finally actively doing what he couldn't do 30 years ago in that tent. He is saving a little boy.
He couldn't save his friend, so he's saving the son of the woman who took his friend. That is incredibly powerful.
For 3 decades, Ethan has been paralyzed, completely frozen in time by the fact that he slept through his friend's departure. He was passive. But by taking in Henry, he becomes active. He ensures that Henry doesn't grow up lost in the foster system, consumed by anger, the way Billy's brother Andy did.
He's stopping the dominoes.
Yes, and by giving Henry the ghost book, he is keeping Billy's memory alive, but he's intentionally stripping it of its horror. Ethan is actively metabolizing his survivor's guilt and replacing it with living, breathing, difficult love.
It's such a profound statement on forgiveness. It tells us that we cannot change the chaotic, terrible things that happen in the middle of the night. We cannot rewind the clock to unsay harsh words. We cannot unslice the tent, and we cannot stop the drunk driver. The dominoes have already fallen.
But we have a choice.
Exactly. We have absolute, total control over the grace we choose to show in the morning.
That is the true resolution of the novel. The ghost of Billy Barringer is finally put to rest, not through vengeance, not through a dramatic courtroom scene, but through an act of radical empathy.
Let's retrace the incredible journey of this deep dive. We started with the chilling, visceral sound of a tent zipper that screeched in the dark that shattered a suburban sanctuary.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We navigated the complex psychological maze of chronic insomnia, trauma responses masquerading as ghosts, and the deeply buried keys of repressed memories. And we finally arrived at the devastating realization that the monsters we fear most aren't hiding in the deep woods.
No, they aren't.
They are just flawed, panicky people living right next door in our summary and making terrible, cascading choices.
It leaves us with a final lingering thought to mull over tonight. We all sleep side by side in our quiet neighborhoods, separated only by thin drywall, manicured hedges, and the occasional motion sensor light.
Right.
Tonight, when you look out your window at the dark silhouettes of the houses on your street, ask yourself, how well do you really know the people sleeping just a few yards away? And what secrets are those security lights failing to illuminate?
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Until next time, keep looking past the surface.